You don't need to train your stabilizer muscles. You'll hear coaches and lifters talk about the need to strengthen the tiny stabilizer muscles that stabilize your joints when you're lifting heavy. And there's a little bit of a problem with that because it's not like you have some hidden muscle groups in your body that you don't know about. Just flip open an anatomy textbook, you'll see all the muscles are right there laid out before us. There's not all these tiny little intricate muscle groups that need to be specially trained. The stabilizer muscles that you're thinking about are muscles that work collectively to stabilize a joint and prevent it from moving when we don't want it to move. And some of those muscles are quite small, such as the rotator cuff muscles. Some of them are really, really big, like your lats or your hamstrings or your abs. They come in all different shapes and sizes, and they work together to create a lack of motion or create motion at a joint, depending on what we want. But you'll often see these stabilizer muscles being trained, supposedly, with exercises that have some sort of chaotic aspect to it. So in the case of a bench press, it might be hanging weights from the bar via bands so they shake around. It might be squatting on a Bosu ball. I don't even own a Bosu ball, so I can't show you a video of that example, but I'm sure you've seen it or you can imagine it. And there's a couple of problems with training like this. First of all, these exercises are hard, but they're hard for the wrong reason. They're incredibly hard to stabilize, hence the name. So you have to take a ton of weight off of the bar. When you reduce the load on the bar, you are getting further and further away from the specificity of powerlifting. Powerlifting is trying to lift as heavy as possible. And when you see a lifter fail a 1 rep max attempt, the weight is too heavy. Something breaks down. You'll hear some coaches say you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if you have a weak stabilizer muscle, then that's what's going to give out when you lift heavy. Yeah, like no shit. Like when the weight is too heavy, you're not going to be able to move the weight. But rather than take a bunch of weight off the bar, removing specificity from the 1 rep max, changing the implement and creating a more chaotic environment, getting less specific, perhaps it makes sense to do more training a little bit closer to one's 1 rep max to improve one's ability to stabilize under heavy loads so that when you do go for a 1 rep max attempt, your technique doesn't fall apart. That seems a little bit more logical to me. The next problem with training your stabilizer muscles with these chaotic exercises is that these muscles co-contract around a joint to prevent unwanted motion. That's a good thing. In the example of your rotator cuff does a lot of different things. It does external rotation, internal rotation, moves your arm like this, but your 4 rotator cuff muscles collectively kind of center the shoulder joint in the shoulder socket. So they create joint centration, adding a little bit more joint stability, if you want to call it that. It prevents the shoulder from moving out of the socket, which is very good in certain situations, such as when you're bench pressing, you're bringing the bar down, you don't want that shoulder to pop up and forward. But the thing is, muscles really only grow bigger and stronger when you take them through range of motion under load. In the case of a rotator cuff, you need a concentric phase. So if I'm training external rotation, I need to have load while I'm moving up like that, and the muscles on the back of my shoulder contract and get shorter. And then I need an eccentric phase, so the lowering portion, and create load in a lengthened or stretched position. That's a pretty surefire way to strengthen and add muscle mass to a muscle group. When you're doing all these chaotic exercises, it's all isometric co-contraction. That can be a good thing, and research seems to indicate that it's a valid way to train somebody in kind of a rehab scenario, somebody who's coming back from some sort of devastating injury and just needs to kind of rebuild simple movement patterns. But if you're somebody who's been lifting a long time, is pretty skilled in the big lifts, is pretty big and strong, I think that the whole sort of chaotic, unstable training approach is a complete waste of time. You're not going to achieve what you want to achieve by doing it. If you actually want to make your stabilizer muscles bigger and stronger, what you have to do is you have to figure out what muscles surround the joint, and then what exercises can I use that actually take those muscles through a range of motion and can be loadable. These are all questions that are super important to ask. In the case of your rotator cuff, you have to do exercises that actually move the arm like this and can be loadable. Are they going to be very light? For sure. Are they going to be worth your time? Probably not. I think you're probably better off strengthening the bigger muscle groups that surround the shoulder joint, the pecs, the traps, the lats. Those things are probably going to be more bang for your buck. In the case of something like the squat, we're talking about the whole glute group. So we have our glute max, glute med, glute min that rotate the hips. So finding a way to load your hip in a rotated position. There's really nothing better for loading the hip through internal and external rotation than squats, split squats, RDLs, one leg RDLs. They don't have to be all these little rinky dink exercises. And I think that's probably the big take home message here, is that in order to train your stabilizer muscles, these little secret muscles, you have to do all these stupid bullshit exercises that aren't really loadable and can't be progressed over time. And that is missing the whole point of strength training, is progressive overload. You need to do a little bit more than you've done before. You got to lift a little bit heavier. You have to do it with a little bit more volume. And these stability exercises just completely miss the mark on that. So if you're actually trying to get bigger and stronger and remove your weak links, think critically about how to actually train these muscle groups and ask yourself, do I just need more exposure to heavy loads so I can improve my skill at those heavy loads and improve my stability? My technique just won't fall apart anymore once I lift heavy weights. So just get rid of all the bullshit, chaotic stability exercises. Actually go lift for real.